Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I just want to take the time here before the video starts to thank you. I honestly cannot thank you enough for you guys to keep coming back to these modest videos that I'm making along the way. This is a whole new process for me, so it's gonna take some time to get used to the dynamic of YouTube, but hope to bring you more videos just as good as these or even better. And before I leave you with today's topic, so I'd like to kindly ask you if you can like, subscribe, and share this channel with people that you know that might be interested in this type of content. And if you want, as a bonus, as an extra, also you can help this channel grow. You can contribute, you can donate via buymeacoffee.com/themodestgeek. I will be leaving all the information in the description down below, so make sure to check that as well. Okay, so now I hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, now back to the main topic of today's video. Since Valentine's is just around the corner, we can call this the weekend of love, right? Anyway, Valentine's is just a few days away, so I just wanted to take a deep dive, or at least, just take a few minutes to recommend 5 movies, romantic comedies that are beautiful and where, the end is all good, basically. And 5 romantic comedies that are more like comedies than romantic, actually, because they're all dwell in issues of heartbreak and breakups and stuff. So basically the other 5 are for people like me, such as myself, who find themselves, in a little bit of a fight with Cupid at the moment, and do not want to know anything about love, and love sucks for them at the moment. For us, I guess. Yeah, sucks. And don't get me wrong, I love. Like, I really love romantic comedies. It's one of my favorite genres. So that's why I'm recommending 5 movies that are really all gooey. They have that gooey sentiment, that corny feeling. And 5 movies that might have a little bit, somewhat, a bittersweet ending. Somewhat, okay? You would have to see for yourselves to judge that. But before we begin with the recommendations, I'm going to just take a, deep dive, 5 movies of each list as fast as possible, because I don't want to take much of your time. So let's begin with what is a romantic comedy. So basically, a romantic comedy is a subgenre of the comedy genre, big genre, comedy, and then we got romantic comedy. Although, the way I think about it, romantic comedy is just another, it could be a subgenre of romance films and comedic films, and they had they met, they were together, and from that it came a beautiful baby called romantic comedy. And basically they focus on a light-hearted, more humorous plot lines or aspects centered on romantic ideas, such as how true love can conquer everything and how it can beat all obstacles. And in fact, actually, one dictionary defines romantic comedy as a funny movie, play, or show about a love story that ends happily. So typically in romantic comedies, yes, spoiler alert for probably about 90% of romantic comedies, they end up, happily ever after, the famous happily ever after. So for those films, I got 5 for you. For happily ever after, I got 5 films, starting with You've Got Mail, if you haven't seen it. Great chemistry between Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Imagine Me and You, one of the greatest romantic comedies in having a centric lesbian love story with Lena Headey and Piper Perabo, which I love. It's one of my, probably, if there was a list of lesbian movies, that would be at the top of my list. Would it? Yeah, probably would be. Among the first ones, I guess. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which is actually has a little bit more of a comedic tone than romance, but it's still wonderful and it's more fun. It was written by Jason Segel, who you might heard of this, show called How I Met Your Mother, just that TV show. And also it has Mila Kunis, Kristen Bell, and Russell Brand. So that's and those are names of like 4 actors that are really important or well known in Hollywood nowadays. Then we got She's Out of My League, starring Jay Baruchel and Alice Eve. Both of them have an amazing chemistry, and it's an unusual type of love story that it's fun, lighthearted to watch, mainly because I love the plot, because it's all about how a guy like him, has to deal with some insecurities because she's dating a girl who's like seen as a goddess, so he has to deal with that insecurity. He's all skinny and awkward. And then last but not least, we got Someone Like You, which, to balance the list of Happily Ever After, it's a little bit more, it's got more romance than comedy, but it's lovely. I believe it's a really underrated movie, and the chemistry between Ashley Judd and Hugh Jackman is actually really lovely to see. They have like a wonderful dynamic as well. I mean, it's they have this back and forth that it's absolutely wonderful. It's really well written. So it's that's also another Happily Ever After type of movie that I recommend. So if I mention Happily Ever After, probably it's gonna have a happy ending. Sorry, but I didn't make the rules. I just roll with it. And we've got 5 not that Happily Ever After type of vibe films that also have some sort of, like a romantic comedy element in them. And these are the following. Classic 500 Days of Summer. 500 Days of Summer, if you haven't seen it, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. There's a lot. Chloe Grace Moretz is in it as well. She's like very, she's like a kid. And it's really fun to watch. And it's not the typical, love stories. It's the unusual love story, if you will say. It's not actually even a love story. Or is it? You would have to see and judge for yourselves as well. Up next, we got He's Just Not That Into You, which is actually, it's not just one story. It's a blend of different stories. Then it all centers around the same idea that either boys or girls have. Although, even the title is, He's Just Not That Into You, pretty much sort of like says that we girls have. But it's in general. I'm going to sort of like apply to like in general terms that this ideal that we have, like of these Prince Charming type of guy who fall in love, and all of those things. And these idealistic idea that we girls or women have about true love and Prince Charming and all that happily ever after, which actually I think this film is kind of cool. If we forget about the He's Just Not That Into You, I would just call it Just Not That Into You, because it can happen to both girls and boys alike. Then we have My Best Friend's Wedding, which is I believe also a 90s film, with Julia Roberts at the center of it all, and I love that film. I think it's a really interesting film, but I'm gonna get into that later, as into why. Forgetting Sarah Marshall made both lists because it's got a somewhat bittersweet ending. It's not entirely, like I said, it's you have to see it for yourself, because Forgetting Sarah Marshall is like really good. The film made it to both lists, so yeah. And last but not least, we got When We First Met, which is a movie that it's again a little bit unusual. It has a little bit of sci-fi elements, a little bit Back to the Future type of vibe, and I think it's really fun actually, because the reason why I thought to include 5 movies that do not have or they don't develop a love story between the 2 main characters per se, and having them end up together, but somehow it does end. It does end in a really good note for the main character. And what I mean to say by that, it's all about the journey the main character goes through to some sort of like overcome these breakups or, you know, like really rough times. And it also talks about how sometimes if you fall in love with your best friend, like my best friend's wedding, it doesn't matter how much you love your best friend. If you fall in love with them, it doesn't automatically mean that the other person will love you back. Because sometimes it happens in real life that you just fall in love with someone, or you like someone, you know, it could be your best friend, it could be, you know, like someone you just met, it doesn't matter, you know, that you might read the situation in a way, but it turns out to be that it's not at all in the way that you thought. No matter how much you want it, sometimes there are things that you will not end up having. And I think that's something that we can all relate to, because we all have our hearts broken, you know, for one thing or the other. Yeah, we can all relate to that. So I think these films, you know, are pretty much, I would probably be watching these films more than I'll be watching the romantic comedy films with a happily ever after, you know. I think the happily ever after type of films, although I love them, don't get me wrong, because who wants to end up seeing the main couple, you know, and not ending up together, especially if they have a great chemistry and their relationship, or at least their story, was developed so good. If I ever actually write a film about romantic comedy, I'm not thinking about not having them end up together, you know. I'm just not. But yeah, they're idyllic, I guess. That would be the word. They're idyllic. Whereas the others, they're not as idyllic, or there are some elements of idealization of love, or, you know, this fantasy of love that we have, but they're more relatable, you know, of our day-to-day love stories or love experiences. So that's it. Those are 10 films in total. They were not listed in any particular order. It's not like number 1, which one is the best, number 5 is the worst. These are films that I chose, that I like, that I recommend watching these holidays for Valentine's, whether you're alone or with someone. These are really great films to have a laugh and, you know, just like having some moments, I guess. Anyway, thank you very much for staying all the way to the end. See you on the next video. Take care.